What's up, everyone, and welcome to the Long Game Podcast hosted by Thomas Kopelman and Jacob Turner. In each episode, you'll hear us break down financial topics that are relevant to you and your situation. Our goal is to help bring credible financial information to you in short, bite-sized episodes.
All opinions expressed on this show are for educational, informational, and entertainment purposes only. Nothing on the Long Game Podcast should be considered advice. Always consult with your team of professionals before making any decisions regarding your finances. Welcome back to another episode of the Long Game Podcast. I'm here with my co-host, Thomas Kopelman. Thomas, how you doing today, man?
I'm good, man. How's everything going with you?
It's been good. You know, one of the things I've been reminded of here in the past couple of weeks, meeting with some new families, some new prospects, is that the quality of good work out there is still somewhat few and far between when it comes to financial advice. And I'm always struck by people that are really qualified, really well-educated people that are actually on the spectrum of like 1 to 10, very well-educated with their personal finances, but are often missing some of the really basic components. And like just having that extra set of eyes can help them find some things that can really set them up for kind of the next stage of growth.
Yeah, I mean, I think I see this day in and day out. I think when we're on social media, you have all of these people who manage their own finances. They live it day in and day out. They know it really, really well. And they're like, how come everybody else doesn't get everything right and do everything right like I do? But then when you look at a lot of these really successful people, I think it's a time issue, right? Like just because somebody's really smart doesn't mean that they have the time to research and figure out all the right things to do financially. So maybe they're not doing backdoor Roths. Maybe they haven't thought about their 401k or any investment accounts in a long time and it's still in a target date fund. Maybe they're sitting on a ton of cash because they have no idea what to do with it and they've been too busy to get time set up to meet with somebody to figure it out. But I see this like literally every time I meet with somebody, I'm like, man, you have this successful business. You're so successful, but it feels like you're in a good spot financially because you've made more than enough money, but you're not in a great spot financially because you haven't taken the time to optimize it. And so I think when people look at financial advisors, a lot of these people with more basic situations, more free time, less complexity, they don't understand why anybody else would want to hire somebody. But then the people who hire somebody are like, I don't think you guys realize how little time, attention, and really just like focus I'm able to have on here to not only know the information, but to take it, apply it, and get those things done.
Yeah. Well, I think you hit on it right there at the end. It's not so much just knowing the information, but it's how do you actually apply it to your own life? And I'll even, I remember for me, when I was sitting on the other side of the table as a client, I was always thinking that like, am I doing this right? Am I doing this wrong? Like it was so helpful to have that second set of eyes. But anyways, I'm really excited to talk about what I wanted to touch on today, which is, we hear this, we have these conversations with clients all the time, right? Like not only what is success, but like what is enough? I think both of you and I work with clients that I would say are past the point of paying their bills, and they're really looking at, okay, I'm having success financially, but what is enough? And I thought it would be a cool topic for us to talk about how we're both thinking about that in our own lives, both building successful businesses, have had a lot of success, are moving towards that. Like, I'd be curious to hear what your take is, because I'm sure this is something that comes up a lot with clients that you're working with.
I think this is maybe the hardest part of all of your financial life, because I don't think there's like this easy rule of thumb or way to look at it, right? Like you could say at 10 million, that's enough. Why would I keep working hard? At 20 million, at 50 million, 100 million? There's all of these reasons why that you might say that's the number. But the hard part is I think it is kind of rooted in what you do, right? Because I think if you look at a lot of successful business owners or people, they love what they do. They actually would do what they do for significantly less money, but they feel passionate. They're driven. Like it's honestly like for me, I look at it as like, sure, are there parts I don't love about my job? Yes. But all in all, like I love the intellectual stimulation. I love the challenge of doing what I do. And I think if I didn't have that, I would be like, what do I do with my free time? Like I love working out. I love going on walks, but like that only can free up so much time, right? So like for me, I think even when I pass my enough number, I would keep working because I love it. But last year on the podcast, I had on Kehi. He's like a pretty well-known creator. And his story was he basically was on Wall Street. I mean, he was getting like, $1 million bonus a year working on Wall Street. And he left it pretty early on because he wanted freedom in his life. He didn't want to work all day, every day in office, like never have time away with his kids, his family, etc. And so he took that step back to make less money and have more freedom in life. He felt like he had enough. Right. So I think these two things are really important here because in that situation, you're giving up a ton. For me, I don't really feel like I give up a ton. Like if I want to scale back, I could have more free time. If I don't want to take on more clients, I can open up more time. If I want to start my workday at this time or leave that time. So I think when you think about the enough, it's very different than I have a really, really high paying job, but I give up a ton. How long do I keep doing this so I have enough to take a step away?
Yeah, well, I think to your point too, it kind of goes back to the concept that we've talked about before, which is this notion of like what is your perfect day? Whereas I think a lot of people are so fixated on this number. And the reality is, in my experience, what I've seen with the number, whether it's 5 million, 10 million, 15 million, 20 million, whatever number you want to get to, the minute you get to that number, the goalposts keep moving and you want to get to the next number. And it never feels like enough from like a monetary standpoint, as opposed to kind of shifting the mindset and saying, you know, what are the things that I love to do and how could I potentially, whether use my money or my resources or my time to do more of the things that I want to do and delegate more of the stuff that I don't want to do. And to me, I think that's the ultimate. And the other thing that I would say too is one takeaway that I've had in talking with a lot of business owner clients that I've tried to really implement in my own life is we call it throwing money over the wall, but this concept that we want to have money outside of our business. And not so much because we feel like the money outside of our business is going to generate a higher IRR than what we would have inside of our business. My hope is that whatever they're doing inside their business is going to generate the highest IRR of any investment that they make.
Makes
But
sense.
what it allows them to do is it allows them to create all this optionality outside of their business and essentially play with like house money with the money inside their business, where they could say, hey, if this all went away tomorrow and I had the money over the wall and I was good, like what an incredible option that they have at that point.
Yeah, I mean, it lets you choose if you want to keep going. It lets you stop if you want to stop. I mean, I think that's obviously the benefit of optionality. But I think on this topic, like I legitimately think this is the hardest thing to have conversations with people about because my experience is the same as you. Like I have clients where, if you ask them their enough number, it's really just kind of like that next level of wealth, right? Like everybody
Yeah.
thinks that when they hit that one level above their wealth is kind of that point where I'm good, right? Like I don't need those other fancy things. And then you have the money and you're like, well, if I have the money, what's the point of saving everything, right? Like you might as well enjoy the nicer restaurants. You might as well get a little bit nicer of a car. And, maybe if you can move, you do that. And then you get there and you're like, it's pretty nice. And then you have the next level of friends next to you, right? And you're like, hmm, you know, their vacations, they might take as a family and they might charter a plane, right? Like, instead of it being 8,000 for us to fly, it's 30,000 for us to fly. But like, wouldn't that be nice? Like we could bring the dogs. We wouldn't have the headaches of, TSA and going through security. And I think then you make that step up. And I think that's dangerous at times, but I also think at other times it can be okay, right? I think it's like, what is that level you look at it? I think if you're doing these things and your goal is about, here's how everybody else views me, I think is very different than, hey, I'm working really hard. I want to use what I've been given to have a nice life. And this is very enjoyable. It makes our life simple. I think it's just like when you're rooted in wealth on the way other people view you, you're time and time again going to find yourself unhappy. But if you're really successful, you're making a lot of money, you're driven, you enjoy your job, and tomorrow, like you don't need another dollar, you show up there tomorrow, and you're going to keep doing that. I think you should be spending money on some of those things that make your life better and more enjoyable.
No, 100%. I think it goes back to there's a book called The Gap and the Gain where we get so caught up on the gap, which is essentially like all the stuff that I don't have, right? Because like every level of wealth that you get to, then you start associating with people that are at the next level of wealth and the level of wealth above that. And I'll tell you right now, like there's no end in sight. I remember I went on a trip where we flew on this private Gulf Stream and went to this incredible resort, and the whole time I was thinking like, one, this is an awesome trip, but this is like another level of wealth that I don't even strive for, because the amount of other things that came with that were things that I was like, man, like I don't really want that. And what the book The Gap in the Game talks about is you have to always reflect on the fact of like how far you've come. And I think oftentimes when I think about success, like, and I think about wealth and I think about the money that you earn from it and the opportunity that you have, one of the coolest parts of that is when you can go to the nice dinner, right? And you can feel good about spending the money because you know how hard it was for you to earn it, or you know the thing you were able to do to buy the new house or to go on the vacation that you want to go on or treat your family to the thing that you want to treat them to. And it's almost that satisfaction that you get out of the hard work that you put in, which I think also lends itself to another question of, for people that have a lot of wealth, that have a lot of success, that have essentially made it, right? Like, how do they think about those conversations with kids, right? Like, we both work with a lot of people that at a certain point are probably going to have a lot of money in their legacy bucket. And I think when you talk about tough conversations, like, that's a conversation that's really tough to have too, is, like, how do we think about the money that we have today, spending it, saving it, investing it, versus the money that we want to leave to that next generation? I'd be curious how you kind of frame that in client conversation.
So I think have you listened at all to Sam Parr's new podcast, Money Wise?
Yeah, I've listened to a couple episodes.
It's super good, and I think it's getting at a lot of, like, the whole theme of this podcast is let's talk to people who have a lot of money about how they spend it, what makes them happy, etc. And I think this is a space where, like, people don't talk about it. So I love when we do these type of episodes because I think a lot of people in this higher wealth range feel unrelated, like it's unrelatable to have this amount of money, but also have this amount of money and also not be happy, right? You're ungrateful, like
Yeah, well, it's almost
all
hard to like. It's hard to even have that. You couldn't go have a conversation with your friend around the fire pit about your first world problem that you have with your $10 million, right? Like,
when they have
it's
500,000 too.
yeah,
It
it
just feels
feels
like you're, yeah.
it feels so out of touch. And I think what I want people listening to this here is like, look, there's problems at all levels of wealth. There's a lot of things that money can help you solve, and like, but once you get over the first hurdle of like being able to pay your bills and like, you know, you can do the things you want. Like, there's a whole nother thing that comes with whatever level of wealth it has. And it doesn't mean it's inherently bad, but I do think it's important to have those conversations. So I'm curious, what's been your takeaway from Money Wise?
I think one of them is that, like, as you build wealth, yes, like the a good house and good vacations and those things are going to bring you happiness, but ultimately you do get pretty used to that. And the things that bring you the most happiness for the average person is the people's lives that you can impact through it. So maybe that's you're with your family and picking up the meals. Maybe it's donating and actually being able to give to charity. But these are the things that I've actually found to make me the happiest. And I think it sounds corny in a way. Like, I love the new house we have. I love the car that I have. Like, I love the vacations we go on. I love all of that. But like, even as I prepared for my wedding this week, one thing that I'm finally in a financial situation where I can like do cool things and give cool gifts. And I'm giving two cool gifts specifically to my brother and my brother-in-law. So my brother-in-law is doing our wedding. He's a diehard Arizona basketball fan. He went to school at Arizona his last couple of years, hasn't been out there. And I'm a big Duke fan. And so for him doing our wedding, my gift was I bought us both tickets to go to Duke, Arizona at Duke
Oh, that's
next year.
awesome.
And I'm like, that's something that I would never have been close to being able to afford even a ticket for me, 4 years ago to now I can pay for both of us to go, et cetera. And I know that's like an experience where I'll walk away and be like, if I didn't do that, we don't have that many experiences, just us two. And then for my brother, there's a really cool golf course in downtown Indy that's expensive that goes through the Speedway 500
Yeah.
track. And I've never played. And he's with his young kids, et cetera. It's hard for him to get out of town. So what I did is I bought us around to go golf there. And I know something that's like an experience we have, something that he's going to really enjoy because he's super into golf now. But I think like giving and paying for experiences with people is one of the fastest ways to be happy. And this goes back to your conversation here of like, so you have wealth and how do you help your kids? And in this last podcast in one of the last episodes, they had on a guy who he grew up, his parents were billionaires. And now he has like a family office or wealth management group to help families figure out how to help their kids with wealth
Mm.
and like teach the lessons. And a lot of it really was about like charity, right? Like getting them involved with charity, helping donate, help do it when you're alive. And I think a lot of people, and Sam Parr was saying this too, like he always thought the best way to do this was amass as much as wealth, let it compound, and then when you pass away, give it all away. And one of the previous guests was like, no, 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 like you should be generous all along the way. One, because it helps. Two, you get to see this while you're alive. And three, money now versus 70 years from now is going to be more impactful and more helpful. And so I think a lot of this just comes back to helping charities, helping people who need help, but also time and experiences and helping create new things with your family or other people who maybe wouldn't have that position to be in.
Yeah, it's such an important point the one thing that I feel like I'm constantly reiterating to clients, and I feel like sometimes I'm just reiterating it so I can hear myself think it too, is that
Totally.
you want to give with warm hands, is what I call it. Like, you know, look, if you kept the money and you invested it better than somebody else and you kept it until you were 85 years old before you essentially passed away, would you have more money to give to charity then versus now? Maybe, but would you get more benefit out of actually giving the money now versus giving the money in the future? And would you enjoy it more versus in the future? And I would argue time and time again, like you'd enjoy it more. And that doesn't, I think for people listening, that doesn't have to be like you actually wrote a check to a charity. Like that can be, Thomas, much like you talked about, like you buying your brother-in-law tickets to a basketball game and you guys are sharing in this incredible experience that like he's not expecting. You're like, man, I wouldn't have been able to do this a couple of years ago, but now that I'm having success financially and the business is doing really well, like what an awesome opportunity to do this. And I think too many people, we sit around and we wait our whole lives saving, saving, saving. And this is coming from somebody who helps people save money, and then we never end up spending it. And that's where I think like when we had this conversation at the beginning about like what is success, I think success ultimately is like using the tools that you have in your life, whatever the skills are, whatever the resources you have, to the benefit of the people that you care about the most. And if
Yeah.
you can do that in a really impactful way, like that's successful. And that doesn't mean that you have to have $20 million to do it. You could have $10,000, but if you're doing that in a meaningful way and you're impacting the people around you, like, man, I'm going to tell you right now, you are going to be far happier than the person with $50 million that's not doing that.
Yeah, I have two important points before we wrap up. One of them is I think that a lot of people have anxiety around money that they think that the next enough or whatever is going to help it go away, right? We're like, hey, I'm going to hoard money. I'm going to save it. I'm not going to spend it. I'm going to do this because I just don't feel like I have a lot of money. I've sat down with two people that are clients now in the last 2 weeks. One of them pays $300,000 a quarter in taxes. He doesn't
Mm,
feel wealthy. He doesn't feel like he has enough money to do things he needs to do. Promise you he does. Another person I sat down today, he's going to make over $100,000 a month take home before taxes, but after business expenses, etc. He's like, I've never feel like I could extravagantly spend on things. I budget every month. I don't go to the nice restaurant. I don't buy nice clothes. And they're like, well, if I made this much, I would. And it's not that. It's a lot of like one, like laying out your finances, see where you're at, see where you're on track, have a plan. But it's also doing a lot of self work to help understand and get rid of that fear. And it's going to
yeah.
take time. But if the next money level isn't going to do it, and I guarantee if I met with them 5 years before and they made 15 or 20,000 a month, they would say, well, for sure at 100,000 a month, I wouldn't think about this. But here they are. The
Mm,
other thing I would say is, talking about giving now, one of the coolest things I got to witness my grandma do is give while alive. And I think way too many people focus on passing on inheritances and doing all these things. But in all reality, right, like my parents right now are, low 60s in all likelihood, life expectancy is mid 80s. I'm the youngest kid. We're all going to be like 45 to 60 years old, right? Like
yep.
inheritances shouldn't be super impactful because you should be in a good spot by then. But what's helpful is like helping your kids when they're younger. It could be college, it could be a down payment of a house, it could be family vacations, it could be helping when they have young kids with their, saving for college for your grandkids, things like that. But I think giving while alive is one, sometimes more beneficial, but two, I think selfishly it allows you to watch the impact of what you've done. And I know as I get older, I know I'll have my enough, but the one thing that I'm going to plan on doing is helping family, friends, etc., with the money that I have, because I want to watch that impact, feel that impact, and also help them when they need that help.
Yeah. No, it's really cool, man. To wrap up, guys, we started this by having this question like, what is success? And what I would say is like Thomas and I both feel the same way. Like, success is using the resources that you have to impact the people around you. And you can do that in a multitude of different ways. Like, that doesn't have to just be writing a check to charity. So I hope you guys enjoyed this. I know Thomas and I are trying to dive into different topics. And frankly, we're trying to dive into a lot of the topics that are coming up more and more often with the clients that we're working with. We're putting a lot into these episodes. So if you're enjoying this, please make sure you like and subscribe, and we'll see you next time.